So, are we starting?
Yep.
Bill's coming back.
Good. Bill's here, we can start.
Yes, we can. Go for it.
I'm Gordon Hardig. Kathy Herdell is sitting over here. Ann Schlepper is next to the projector. John Graves is recording us. And then Pastor Lynn, we put together this presentation to commemorate, it was 125 years ago tomorrow that they dedicated the sanctuary. And it's the same space people have been worshiping in for 125 years in some ways. In other ways, it's quite different than it used to be. Just as a couple of preliminaries, the church building was built in less than 7 months. From the time they laid the cornerstone in October 1889, October 13, 1889, until the time it was dedicated. It was 6 months and 10 days, something along those lines. And we were trying to imagine anything getting built in that time frame today. And it just wouldn't happen. So, well, one other thing to note, Kathy Herdell's grandfather was part of the construction crew. William, his name was William.
William Wrinkle.
William Wrinkle. And he reported that one worker was killed in a fall during the construction of the church. We haven't checked any for, there must be a newspaper report about that somewhere. What we would like, many of you have been here much longer than I have. I grew up in St. Lucas and then I was gone for 30-something years. Kathy was here, and then she spent a few years in Kentucky when she wasn't here. I think, Ann, you've been here continuously.
Yes.
And then John has been, how long have you been at St. Lucas? 10 years?
Me?
Yeah.
5, 6, go on 6. Yeah.
So a lot of you have information that we might not think of, and you might remember what the place looked like before. So, okay, this window is in the room to the left of the chancel, and it is the only remaining original window left in the church building. If you think about all the stained glass windows that we have now, those were added in 1911. Before that, all of the windows had this same glass. So just you would get a totally different feel sitting in the sanctuary with the simple glass that you do with the stained glass today. Okay. This is the earliest sketch, earliest image that we know of the St. Lucas sanctuary. And when I first saw it, I hadn't seen pictures of this before. I thought this was a generic church from Germany used in the Christmas newsletter. But this was actually what St. Lucas looked like at that time. And they had a display, they had Christmas trees and hearth display. And it says, honor God on high, is what's written on the hearth. You had a flashlight?
Yeah, I'll get it.
You got a flashlight with a pointer on it.
Sorry about that.
So, Gordon, what does it say on the bottom in German?
On the bottom,
Yeah.
it's am Weihnachtsabend, which is on Christmas Eve.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm thinking that Legemann, this must be the person who did the sketch. It was some sort of an etching. It was reproduced in the St. Lucas newsletter. And but you'll see the doors they don't look like they do today on the sides, and they have transom windows up on top. But you'll see on the next picture has this writing that Lynn mentioned this morning in the service. And that was done by the first person to sign the membership list. His name was, Adolf Geki. That was your grandfather? Great-grandfather. And he also is the one to whom the round window above the balcony is dedicated. But he was the first member to sign the membership list at St. Lucas. So if we go to the next image, I believe it has the same, this is an actual photograph from 1896, the confirmation class from 1896. This,
You have to scroll through it to get there. Go ahead.
okay, that is Pastor John, Samuel A. John, who was here in 1894 to 1903. And this was a confirmation class. All of the confirmation instruction was done in German. This was a German church. I mean, it could. Okay, Herr ist in seinem heiligen Tempel, es sei vor ihm stille aller Welt, which is what we sang this morning. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the world be silent before him. And this is a bit better.
Just a second ago before, there it is.
It's on.
You have to hold it
Oh,
down.
you have to hold it.
Yeah, you have to hold it
Okay.
while you're pointing.
Good.
Okay?
The pulpit, she wants to know where the pulpit is.
The pulpit was not there. The chancel was organ centered. This was an organ that was installed in 1893. It was a Edward Giesecke organ. All of those are actual organ pipes, they're working pipes. And the choir members today told me that the pipes that are on the side of the chancel today that are painted gold are from this original organ. Well, actually, this was not, this was the second organ that was in here. There was some sort of temporary organ, maybe just a pump organ that was here for the first couple of years.
They're non-working pipes.
They're not, the pipes that are visible today in the chancel are non-working pipes. But the organist sat here with his back to the congregation. The pews are the original pews. They were, it cost, let's see, $475 to have the Heffrich and Sons Planing Mill make the pews and install them. And then they paid another person, Mr. John Geis, who was member number 26.
That's Ann's grandfather.
That's your grandfather. He was paid $90 then to stain all of the pews. So together, 475 plus 90 is what, 565? By contrast, the minister had an annual salary in the late 1800s of $700 per year plus housing. So it was a pretty good chunk of money back then. You know, go on.
What was the cost of the original building?
That I do have somewhere, but I'll have to look that up and then I
I'm thinking I read it was $10,000.
can, you know, it could be. I didn't write that down. And I also did not write down the purchase price of the lots.
Land.
Right. It was within a week of the time that the church was formed that they bought property on the corner of Baker and Virginia. So they had plans and then they put them in motion pretty quickly. So we'll need to look up the cost of what it costs in construction. Let me see what else here. I think we're ready for the next. The sanctuary was carpeted from the beginning. You can't see the carpet in the first picture, but here you can. And it was, we think it was a grayish blue, similar to what was in here when I was growing up in the 1960s, with a pattern on it. This is Pastor M. Christian Christensen, who like Steve Stevenson and Jacob Jacobson. Right. But what is interesting here, these are the original windows with the glass, the greenish white glass in the chancel. That was an exterior wall when it was built. And the only room that they had for Sunday school originally were the two little rooms on either side of the chancels.
Oh, my.
And at first, I mean, they quickly outgrew that space. And they did rent space on Main Street, I think it was on the corner of Oregon and Main for a couple of years. Then they built a wooden structure where the choir room is now. It was north of this. And that served as a Sunday school, and it was called a chapel. There's no picture of it that anyone knows that exists, but it is, that building is on the fire maps from that era, if you go to Willard Library. This is Pastor Christensen, was the first minister to offer English as an option for confirmation instruction.
What year class was that?
That was, I believe it was 1904, he got permission to do that. And yeah, it's not written on this one.
It really is.
Oh, confirmation instruction in 1908. I guess we can go to the next.
35 kids in class.
This is an actual confirmation certificate from St. Lucas in German. Adelia Wilhelmina Louisa Führing is the girl who was confirmed, and this is from 1908. In 1908, it was still primarily in German. The confirmation instruction was that Pastor Christensen got permission in 1909 that he had about 2 or 3 students receive confirmation instruction in English. And then by 1911, 1912, over half of the kids at St. Lucas were being confirmed in English. So once it was offered, it took off really quickly. And it was the young people in the congregation. There was an organization that was founded in 1897, the Sunday Evening League. And they were the ones pushing for English, for the use of English at St. Lucas, because they saw that as the future. And they eventually got permission for the Sunday evening service to be held in English every other week originally, and then eventually it became every week, and that organization was responsible for everything that had to do with the Sunday evening services in English.
Where did we get that confirmation certificate? Is that somebody's family?
This was upstairs in a cabinet in the archives room, and the paper is falling apart, so I took a picture of it.
What was
The
the last
Führings,
name of this person? I didn't.
the last name is Führing, F-U-E-H-R-I-N-G, and they were an early family in St. Lucas. I don't know if there are any descendants who are still around or not. But, okay, next. This is Forrest Carl Wrinkle's baptism certificate, or, yeah, it was a baptism
Baptism.
certificate.
Kathy's dad.
This
My
is
dad.
Kathy's dad. The name of Kathy's mother is
My mother.
misspelled.
Yeah.
It should be with a K, but Pastor Christensen, I guess because he has C's in his own name, he spelled it with a C. And she was a Kuhlenschmidt. And I also have Kuhlenschmidt ancestors, so Kathy and I are related. If you go back to,
Sparta.
I think it's our grandfather's grandfathers. We share a common ancestor. But all of these records were in German up until probably the World War I era. When the United States got involved in World War I, then they ceased. German services were suspended for a while at that point. So.
And Gordon, at this point, at the beginning of the church, our denomination was just evangelical, would that be right?
It started out, it was founded as German Evangelical, and there was a German Evangelical Synod, which Lynn can maybe correct me on this, that became the Missouri's, it was,
No, Missouri Synod is a Lutheran.
it was based in Missouri, it was the
Yes, it was based in the St. Louis area.
Evangelical Synod of the West, is that what it was called?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's right too.
But originally, all of the churches in that synod were German churches. And then when English became more prevalent, then they changed the name of the synod. So it was German Evangelical, and then it became Evangelical and Reformed, which I think took place in 1952.
No, 34.
34. And the 50s was when it became the United Church of Christ.
57.
Yes.
Correct.
I know.
Okay, next. The stained glass windows were put in 1911, and they were all sponsored by either individuals in the church or by organizations in the church. And 3 of the windows in the sanctuary today have German dedications. And this says in remembrance of Anna Maria Wittekind. And Anna Maria Wittekind. Do what?
The parents, that was for the mother of a friend of my parents.
Okay. The mother of a friend of Sue's parents was this person to whom it's dedicated.
Bill was his name, Whitaker.
Bill?
William.
And yeah, I remember that name too. Were they still around in the 50s, the family?
They came here for a while. He was my age, Bill Whitaker was, and then they changed their
So that's
membership.
his son,
Yeah.
his son, not the friend of my parents.
Right.
The grandson of this boy.
But he's still alive. He lives in Evansville today. Bill does.
Okay. The windows,
In memory
yeah, 1911, and I pursued this because Jan, when we were talking about the windows a few years ago, this was mail order, basically, catalog.
Is that right?
And they had designs that were available. This was a company in St. Louis. They built the church building, the sanctuary, with the window openings intact, and probably to the dimensions that where they had stained glass available, because they had this plan in mind all along. And
Can you recognize anybody?
What year was that?
this year was,
Do you recognize him?
and he's on the wrong
What year
place
is
again.
that? Yeah, yes.
I noticed that when I took it home, you had corrected. It doesn't want to change the arrows once you put them in, but it's this
Yes.
fellow is Kathy's father.
Horace Sprinkle in
And
the voice choir. What year is that?
this is, well, I have 1912, but I'm thinking it could be 1912, 1913.
Flowers growing in the baptism font.
They use it for,
Oh, my goodness.
and see, the baptism of font has been, it's a fixture since 1900. It
Too
was,
big to move.
well, you move it from one side to the other, but it's very,
Three people.
3 men and a boy.
and, but this shows the original windows in the chancel having been replaced with stained glass. And the stained glass in the chancel were donated, both of those windows were donated by the Sunday Evening League, which was the English, the arm of the church that was promoting the use of English. And I think it's significant that they were placed in that spot, but we're not sure what the significance is. And on the one hand, they weren't visible to anyone except people, the organists, basically. But on the other hand, it was the centerpiece of the whole sanctuary.
Those are still in the choir room, aren't they? Yes.
Yeah, those are the ones that are in the choir room today. But they replaced the transom windows above the doors have stained glass in them now. I thought this was interesting because I never knew St. Lucas used number boards for the hymns. And there's also
In recent years.
radiators.
Radiators, I forgot. We used to think what is that?
Um,
90s or 80s?
How hard is it to go back?
Not hard.
So if we keep going back to the picture with Pastor John, one more. This was a gas pipe fixture. See the pipe? So when the church was built, they didn't wire it for electricity, they had gas lighting. And it was 1911 when electricity replaced the gas lights. And they were talking about having a single celebratory service to commemorate electricity and stained glass. And I'm not sure if that actually took place or not, but that had been proposed at both of these big events.
That was it.
Okay, this photographer, Deeds, he died in about 1927, but there are some other things. If you Google him, you can find several other pictures from the 1910s.
Who's the pastor?
This is the same pastor, this is Sheik, no, it's a different pastor, it's Herman J. Sheik, and he served St. Lucas from 1909 to 1919, and he was the fourth pastor here. The chorus, you see it's all boys and then there are a few men back here. That was a fixture at St. Lucas, a men and boys chorus at Easter time, even into the time when Dr. Heusler was the minister here. And that's when my stepmother was Carolyn Drain was her name at the time. She grew up in St. Lucas, and she remembers Pastor Schroeder from the 1920s. And the men and boys chorus was still a very popular thing and well known throughout the city. At this time, St. Lucas was really growing exponentially, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that you had the Sunday Evening League promoting English. There was a Reformed church several blocks away on Elsass Avenue, and they didn't want to have anything to do with English. They didn't want their minister to associate with other ministers in the city. There was a consortium of Protestant ministers, German Protestant ministers in Evansville, and the Reformed Church at first allowed their minister to participate, and then they pulled the plug on it, and that church went out of business in 1903. They didn't grow. They cut themselves off from any possibility of growing. So next. These are the two windows that were in the chancel in when it was exterior walls. Let's see if I'm not there. This is Noah's Ark, and if you were looking at the chancel, this was the right-hand window in the chancel, and the other one is a beacon of light, and that was on the left side. And so these, when they added the addition that it was the church office until 1969 and the minister's study. That was 1935. That's when those walls became interior walls, and then at that time they moved these two windows from the chancel to the part of the new addition. And this was taken in February of this year, and people who've seen it marveled at how clean it is. There's no music stacked anywhere. So someone had just cleaned it when I went in there. And this is one of the dedication panels in English, of course, Sunday Evening League. So they were the promoters of English. They were responsible for building the Parish Hall Caddy Corner across the street in 1907. They had the Sunday school. It was separate membership at that time, the Sunday school, or the Sunday Evening League, and the church. And those were not merged until sometime after World War I, where membership in one organization and the other became one and the same. But this was a happening place back in those days, and after the parish hall got built, they had lectures and concerts and dances, and there were sometimes where they'd have 1,000 people or more. They had so many people coming to these events that they had to turn them away at the door because they couldn't fit any more people inside. So
And there were a lot more pews than there are now.
there
You're
were,
right.
More than
Our
filled.
there were, it's too bad Ray Baggett's not here, because
Aggressive.
on each side, there were 3 more pews than there are today. And back in the when was Ray here? It was the 80s and into the 70s and 80s. They used to remove the first 3 rows of pews on each side, bring them in here to store them, which they couldn't make that corner, so they had to take them out the front door, take them around this way, so that the orchestra would have space at Christmas and Easter to play. And then at some point, it was prior to the 1980s, at some point they decided just to remove them permanently. But these are the original pews, and they've held up. They didn't have any pads in those days.
Point out the lights hanging from the beams
Right.
on the side.
When they put electricity in,
I remember those, I remember those too.
I think those were here until it was 1950 renovation, 56.
It was on every other beam, first, third, and fifth beams.
And then baptismal font is closer here to the altar. And this is still, this was from the 1914 renovations. The German writing around the arch of the chancel has been replaced with these decorative, what they call fresco paintings. There are also a fresco on the side walls and all the way up around. That's all painting. The radiators are still in place. We think, well, Evansville in the 1800s provided steam heat to, they didn't have their own furnaces, but we think from descriptions that St. Lucas was built with a cold furnace or a cold boiler providing steam heat, because in 1893 there was a fire in the cold boiler that damaged, we think, this area right in front here under the carpet. There's a burn mark. And it's from that fire. It didn't do much damage, but so we think that when St. Lucas was built, the city of Evansville was no longer pumping steam. And this was a new part of town too at that point, so maybe the steam network never even got up this far north. So I'll go back for just a second. Look at the name of the church in English. It's St. Luke's. St. Luke's. And it was referred to as St. Luke's in English very early. Sometimes as St. Lucas, sometimes as St. Luke's, and so eventually the name St. Lucas won out, and that's what it's been called. But this is from the 25th anniversary booklet from 1914, which was half done in German and half in English. And it didn't say the same things. So, okay. This is another picture of Pastor Sheep, and you've got the arrow pointing to Kathy's father again.
That's the right one.
Yes, it is.
But this window was, at that time, this is the Virginia Street entrance to the church, and this window was part of the sanctuary at that time. The sanctuary and the pews went all the way back where the narthex is now, and all the way back on the pulpit side to Virginia Street. And so this window it's in the narthex today, but it's not visible from inside, because when they did the renovations in 1956, they walled it up on the inside, so it's visible only from the outside.
Safety precautions.
Right. So, okay, next. This is from the 1930s, 1935 renovation. And I've got to cut the late 1930s.
There.
But, so on this side, then the pews would keep going all the way back to Virginia Street. And on this side, you'll see it in a minute, they have a little foyer, they called it an entry hall. But it was 1935 then when the chancel became altar-based instead of organ-based. They put in the current organ, the Skinner organ, and the pipes, the acting pipes are in alcoves up on this side and up on this side. And the pipes that are hanging, that are visible in the chancel are from the original, the earlier organ.
That rose window, when was it put in place?
It was put in 1935. And so when you had exterior stained glass windows on this side and here, they've been replaced by doors now. And then go back to the addition from 1935 and see where the baptismal font is now. But the radiators are gone. So they had a different kind of heating system.
Lighting in the middle.
Lighting,
Yeah, that big globe.
right. But these are still on the beams.
They've also painted the base of the arch. That was in the other picture. Now they're all solid.
They're all,
All the same color.
Today, they're all wood, that white or whatever that is on the base of
On
each of
each
the
side
arches.
base of the arch, of the wood, on the
side
side
wall.
walls of the
On the
church,
side wall.
between the windows.
the side
Go
that's in
straight
here.
up there.
Go right up. Go
Straight
up.
up,
Straight
straight
up.
up, straight
Oh, I
up,
see what
right
you're talking
there.
about.
Oh, okay,
Like a
yes.
foundation base.
I hadn't noticed that, but that's true.
In the other pictures too, they were that, whatever color that is, but now they are all.
There's all wood.
Dark wood.
Wonder when they remodeled it.
They remodeled in
But
1956.
Yeah. In the
they were,
late
it's the same
fifties.
now. There was some wood showing.
Yes.
So it's somehow they stripped them and stained them so that it matched the rest of the woodwork. Okay. And the baptismal font way over here. But this is where the front of the sanctuary took on the appearance of today, with the altar in the center, the rose window, and this is only artificial light now because these are interior walls now. So, and it was a former custodian, Ken Owen, some of you may remember, and he told me to change the light bulbs, you had to climb up on the roof in the back for the rose windows, so it was not something anyone looked forward to doing. The hymnals that are in the racks here were the blue hymnals that we just removed. And was Hymns of Praise, is that the name of it? No, it was just called the hymnal. The earlier one,
The hymns of praise was the earlier one.
It was the
We used to
earlier
use
one.
those in Sunday school.
and there still are some of those in the old pastor study. The blue hymnal was, so these are still would be hymns of praise because the blue hymnal was first published in 1941. So these are the ones that were used then when I was growing up in Sunday school for the opening. The orchestra played every Sunday in those days at the Sunday school opening.
Yeah, every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
Yeah.
And then some of us would skip out and go down to Naughty Pine and have coffee. And now Naughty Pine is gone. So, okay.
Yeah, that's,
This is the only picture that I've seen that shows the sanctuary from this direction. Now, this is the pulpit side. You go back to here, this is the window that we saw on the outside to the right of the Virginia Street entrance. This was the only entryway that they had. The bell tower was still where it is now, but you had to access it by a ladder. and you went up and then entered into this space to ring the bell. And this is the window that was dedicated to Adolf Geikie, who was the one responsible for the German lettering around the chancel and the artwork. The windows opened days before air conditioning. Is this Ed Kinkle?
Yes, this is Ed Kinkle in the second row on the left. No,
There's
one
Carl
back.
Niedermeyer next to him,
And who is next to
tall
him?
fella,
No,
with a
Carl
long
Niedermeyer
tie.
in the front row.
This one?
Front row.
Oh, that's Carl Niedermeyer?
Yeah, that's Carl.
Tommy Niedermeyer's dad.
Yeah, he
Oh,
was,
really?
a year behind.
I knew people would recognize some more people.
Yeah.
Is that
Anybody recognize anybody else?
Well, give me time. What year was this?
This was, it said it was 1940, but January 1940, I don't think the windows would have been open, and that's when they had the 50th. So I think this is probably 1939 in the summertime.
It had to be in the 40s, because Carl was a year younger than me.
He was in my confirmation.
And he looks like he's in his teens there, ain't
This was in the 50th anniversary booklet,
he? Yeah.
which, and that was January 1940.
Niedermeyer's brother, Tommy? No.
Tommy,
Oh, that's Carl.
I said it would have been his, Tommy's brother.
Right.
So this is Carl Niedermeyer,
That's
Yes.
Carl, yeah.
Tommy's
and
brother,
Edwin
Carl.
and, but look how people are dressed.
Oh, yes, that's right, yes.
Men were wearing ties, most of them coats and ties,
And women wore hats every Sunday.
Right, hats.
Gloves. Hats and gloves.
and dresses.
Yeah, dresses, sure.
Any dresses in here?
Yeah, we wore girdles so we didn't need it.
Now, there are a few younger boys here who are not wearing ties.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was growing up, we had to wear, every Sunday we'd have to put on a coat and tie. And we had bow ties in those days too. There were a couple of bow ties visible. Ah, yes, there's a bow tie. But the pews went then all the way up to the front. There were 3 more rows of pews.
Hey, Gordon,
Mhm.
the pointer, please. Marion thinks she has spotted her
I
dad.
never seen a dad.
So it's back here.
About the 6th row, he's got a black suit tie on the far left. Right there. No,
Oh,
to the right,
there.
there.
I'll be darned.
I think that's dad's, yeah. Their mother.
There you go.
It's better when Shane's
That's
in
what
there.
it's at.
Yeah, better off in there too.
Yeah,
That's
but
why
there gotta be people in here that I would remember from when I was a kid. So, I think this is the only picture that exists from those days that shows from the chancel toward the back.
Right.
Yeah.
I was told that when you rang the bell, if, back then, when you held onto the rope, it would take you up to the 2nd floor.
Oh, really? Really?
I would believe it.
Who got to do that? You could ride the rope.
Really? Do you remember that?
I didn't do it.
That was the key you've been playing with.
See them do it. And one thing I didn't mention before, which should have, is when it has to do with the Habakkuk scripture that was over there. You didn't say a word when you came into the church.
Yeah.
Totally silent, and the bulletin said something like, enter in silence,
Yes.
prepare yourself in prayer. And we're not sure when, I've talked to a number of people, when that changed, but we think it kind of was a gradual shift over the years. But even in the 80s and 90s, there was some version of that statement in the bulletin every Sunday. And the pastors would chew out people for talking even in the entry hall. There was one article in the newsletter where it said it's better to come in and sit in silence like you're supposed to, but if you have to talk, don't do it in the entry hall because you're disturbing people. You have to go outside and talk. So that was
They'd
different.
flip today, wouldn't they? Whoa.
I guess I need to become meaner, huh?
I think so. Much too nice.
You have any ideas?
But in that picture,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, but the wood, this has been changed.
There's the wood right now.
There's the wood.
there it is,
Okay,
next.
it's not painted anymore. Okay, sorry, Lynn.
That's all right.
This is was the parsonage. It was built in,
There, Lynn, you could have been living in that.
That's right.
it was built in 1895 and
Slate roof.
Yep.
was demolished in 1969 to make room for the building where we are right now. The reason this was also an exterior window in the sanctuary when it went all the way back to Virginia Street. Today, in this spot, there's the stairwell going down to the basement restrooms under the narthex and going up to the balcony. And so it comes out. They removed this window in 1956. With the workers, however, when they were doing the construction work, they broke this panel, the dedication panel. So they moved the panel, which was from the home department, moved it over to this window so that one was the SODE's window, S-O-D-E, that they had dedicated. The top part of this window then went to Deaconess Hospital and was used in their chapel until they remodeled it. And no one is sure what happened to the window after that. But the parsonage was 1895, and I remember it as a beautiful building. Apparently they always had water issues in the basement. And but this area, which I guess had been originally a dining room, we had the children's choir rehearsals in there. And you said you had the senior choir rehearsals in that building too. And there was some
Up in the window above the porch.
and so you had Sunday school classes here too?
Art, what was that couple's class?
Well, there were tons of Sunday school
They're going there
classes.
rather wholesale.
About the time this edition was made, 1956, St. Lucas had 1,000 members or more, and it was one of the largest churches in Evansville.
And guys got in trouble in that house.
More than once.
Yep.
But it
That's
was
how
so
I am.
wonderful with a front and a back stairway, you could just,
Oh,
you know,
You
hide and
could
seek.
just go,
And Mrs. Weisler was never home like our mother was at home seeing what we were doing, but she was busy, you know. Oh gosh, yeah, we got a little carried away a time or two and got in trouble.
I remember getting in trouble in that building too. Now, Bill got in trouble in the other building.
I can believe that.
Said he had the riot act read to him one day by, was it Hoffman?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the minister when I was confirmed too. He was here after Heusler, and I guess from like 1959 to 1969, it was about 10 years.
Yeah, Bill was our confirmation class.
I can't believe that. Hard to believe.
I don't believe too many of us went in that house when Heusler had it.
When Heusler,
Oh, yeah.
when he lived there until.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of
Yeah.
young people's meetings over there. And Mary Mae's couples was in that single window over the porch, that's what he.
Is that up in this one?
Over the porch.
Oh, yeah, over here.
Oh, we were in
Was
trouble.
anybody else in that class?
Mary Mates.
Yeah.
Mary Mae's.
And they had, when Gene Gross was in the Carwell Law class with my father, and I was named after 3 veterans.
Yeah, Carl Hill.
But there was something that was donated by the Live Wires class. For a short time, it was an unfortunate choice of a Sunday school name, but in the teens and early 20s, there was a swastika class.
Oh, my.
Because the swastika was a symbol of good fortune and hope, and it had not yet been appropriated by the Nazi party in Germany. And there were single-sex, there were women's Sunday school classes, men's Sunday school classes, and then there were couples where the Mary Mates, I guess, was a couples class.
Yeah, the Logsons founded that class.
Hiram Logston.
They organized that.
And then there was the Red Cross class, which was, and they're the ones that they gave the Bibles out, I believe, when I was confirmed. And the music committee, that's why I have a blue hymnal at home, was because the kids who participated in the children's choir at that time, which was everyone because you had to. Even like me, if you can't sing, you still had to do it. But then they gave everyone a hymnal the year that I was confirmed. So, okay, let's move right along. This is 1964 with the 75th anniversary, and it looks much the same except the walls are different
And the
color.
boxes, wood or
Doors.
Yeah.
Much the same as today.
And the carpet's not blue yet, so what year is that?
This is 1964.
Okay. So it was kind of a greenish
It
carpet.
was
Yeah.
greenish blue, but it had a
And it had a
pattern.
pattern in it, because I was wearing it.
The current carpet was 1971. Is it Dorothy?
Gordon, I'm taking this back a little ways. Did you have any information about the dorms that we had during World War II for the soldiers that came up from Camp Breckenridge?
Wasn't that over
Yeah.
in Sunday school?
They were over
And it
in the
was
Sunday
It
school,
was in the parish hall.
the parish hall,
And
and they also provided childcare from some of the stuff that I read for people working, because the women were going to work in the factories and the men were overseas, and so that was one service. Imagine government-sponsored childcare, but it happened.
the men of the church would come and have that dorm open on Saturday nights.
But I believe that they slept over in, I don't know which rooms, or if it was just the big room, but it was like a dormitory situation where they had cots set up.
Lower level.
You think it was lower level probably because of the heat.
Yeah,
Um,
right straight in now.
Gee,
Something else, they had a
Yeah, that was
tremendous
after,
Boy Scout troop here back in the early 30s. That's what brought me here in 35.
is that right?
Boy
1930.
Scout troop. And then from there I stayed and was confirmed, but Dorothy and I was confirmed in the same class. And, but they had I didn't know whether you was gonna maybe get onto that in here, but they had a very good
They had a
Boy
Girl
Scout
Scout?
troop.
They had Girl Scouts, they had campfire girls that were sponsored here too.
Yeah.
I think the Boy Scouts, even when I was growing up, there still is a Boy Scout troop that was sponsored by St. Lucas. And my mother was a Girl Scout leader, and
Yes.
Mag was, and Ann were in the Girl Scout troop that my mother was a leader in. My mother was Harriet Jones,
Jones, Harriet.
and so she had been a Lutheran family. Levon, I guess you can tell this story to Gary. The minister at the Lutheran church family history says that he accused my mother's mother of having to get married, and which, you know, it was 5 years after they were married before the first kid was born. So a long period of pregnancy, I guess. But she got mad then at that church, and that's how they came to St. Lucas.
I don't blame her. It was our game.
So, but this is what I remember it like. This was, I think this was the same year that I was confirmed. 64. No, I think I was 66. And the baptismal font is in a different
Back
spot.
over there, moved again.
But it's not over that as far. But this was all added in 1956. Oh no, this was the 1930 renovation. The pews still go all the way up to the front. So I guess we should head to the next one. This is 1989. This was the 100th anniversary.
Yep.
And look, here's the carpet that's in there today.
1971.
Yeah.
I'll let Jim tell you about the carpet.
1971 from
Yeah, we know.
Edna Johnson, who didn't like the previous carpet, and her daughter Maxine was getting married, so she paid and got to pick the color. But then by 1989, the walls had been painted the same color that they are today, pretty much. So,
Yeah, the carpet came from Small and Chulosky County.
From where?
Small and Swalovski camping.
Shalosky, does that ring a bell?
Uh-huh, so you're responsible for the carpet?
Oh, my dad. I'll let Jim tell you about that.
Bob Solosky and I both quoted on the carpet. I quoted Armstrong, he quoted Mohawk, and for some reason he cheated and got the order.
And we don't hold
He
grudges
must have been
in
a little
this
older,
church.
had more experience than that.
He cheated.
I remember when the church was remodeled, my husband was working for Herman Redker at the time. Redker did all the all the wiring, and Jim brought home the catalogs one day. And he said, "These are going to be our new lights in the sanctuary." I said, "Oh, they're so different." I remember seeing a picture of them before they ever put them up.
You know, and the flags too, the flags go back to the World War I era, but they weren't in the pictures that they took of the sanctuaries for the anniversaries. They're not here. So I'm thinking maybe they just removed them temporarily to take the picture. But this is Old Glory, and then this is the Christian flag, the flag of the cross. And they were donated because at that time, I mean, this was a German church and still had a lot of German speakers, and they felt pressure to show that they were patriotic Americans. And so that was one of the reasons for the timing of getting the flag into the sanctuary at that time. So, okay, I think is there one more? Can you imagine doing this back in the 1950s?
Talking.
Talking and getting up and moving around. The pews are the same, but this shows the 1956, the narthex was built with the glass walls, the crying room, the balcony, and this is the window where it has the bottom dedication panel that was moved because it was the one that was in this spot was broken by the construction. And so this was just taken, I think it was in February, maybe early March. But you don't see any pictures, any other pictures showing, looking this direction in the church.
No.
And so.
I used to raise those pews.
Lights, Fred, lights.
I have one question.
Okay, other questions?
I celebrated my 90th birthday a short while ago. Am I the oldest continuous member